Hello, angels. Well, here we go with the next part of The Hobbit, Chapter 1. If you are already ahead in your reading, that's great. If you want to listen to see if there's anything you pick up new, that's awesome as well. In any case, here we go. Of course, just backing it up, right? The dwarves have just all brought their instruments in and they are about to begin their song. The dark filled all the room, and the fire died down, and the shadows were lost, and still they played on. And suddenly first one and then another began to sing as they played, deep-throated singing of the dwarves in the deep places of their ancient homes. And this is like a fragment of their song, if it can be like their song without their music. Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must away ere break of day to seek the pale enchanted gold. The dwarves of yore made mighty spells while hammers fell like ringing bells in places deep where dark things sleep, in hollow halls beneath the fells. For ancient king and elvish lord, their many a gloaming golden hoard, they shaped and wrought and light they caught to hide in gems on hilt of sword. On silver necklaces they strung the flowering stars, on crowns they hung the dragon fire and twisted wire, they meshed the light of moon and sun. Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must away ere break of day to claim our long forgotten gold. Goblets they carved there for themselves, and harps of gold where no man delves. There lay they long, and many a song was sung unheard by men or elves. The pines were roaring on the height, the moons were moaning in the night, the winds were moaning in the night. The fire was red, it flaming spread, the trees like torches blazed with light. The bells were ringing in the dale, and men looked up with faces pale. The dragon's ire, more fierce than fire, laid low their towers and houses frail. The mountains smoked beneath the moon, the dwarves, they heard the tramp of doom. They fled their hall to dying fall, beneath his feet, beneath the moon. Far over the misty mountains grim, to dungeons deep and caverns dim, we must away ere break of day to win our harps and gold from him. As they sang, the hobbit felt the love of beautiful things made by hands and by cunning and by magic moving through him, a fierce and jealous love, the desire of the hearts of dwarves. Then something tookish woke up inside him, and he wished to go and see the great mountains and hear the pine trees and the waterfalls and explore the caves and wear a sword instead of a walking stick. He looked out of the window. Stars were out in a dark sky above the trees. He thought of the jewels of the dwarves shining in dark caverns. Suddenly in the wood beyond the water, a flame leapt up, probably somebody lighting a wood fire. And he thought of plundering dragons settling on his quiet hill and kindling it all to flames. He shuddered, and very quickly he was playing Mr. Baggins of Bag End under hill again. He got up trembling. He had less than half a mind to fetch the lamp, and more than half a mind to pretend to and go and hide behind the beer barrels in the cellar, and not come out again until all the dwarfs had gone away. Suddenly he found the music and the singing had stopped, and they were all looking at him with eyes shining in the dark. "Where are you going?" said Thorin, in a tone that seemed to show he guessed both halves of the hobbit's mind. "What about a little light?" said Bilbo apologetically. "We like the dark," said the dwarf. "Dark for dark business. There are many hours before dawn." "Of course," said Bilbo, and sat down in a hurry. He missed the stool and sat in the fender, knocking over the poker and shovel with a crash. "Hush," said Gandalf. "Let Thorin speak." And this is how Thorin began. "Gandalf, the dwarves, and Mr. Baggins, we are not together in the house of our friend and fellow conspirator, now together in this house of our friend and fellow conspirator, this most excellent and audacious hobbit. May the hair on his toes never fall out. All praise to his wine and ale. He paused for breath and for a polite remark from the Hobbit, but the compliments were quite lost on poor Bilbo Baggins, who was wagging his mouth in protest at being called audacious, which means brave, and worst of all, fellow conspirator. Though no noise came out, he was flummoxed, which means confused. So Thorin went on. We are met to discuss our plans, our ways, means, policy, and devices. We shall soon, before the break of day, start on our long journey. A journey from which some of us, and perhaps all of us, except our friend and counselor, the ingenious wizard Gandalf, may never return. It is a solemn moment. Our object is, I take it, well known to us all. To the estimable Mr. Baggins, and perhaps to one or two of the younger dwarves, I think I should be right in naming Keely and Feely, for instance, the exact situation of the moment may require a little brief explanation. This was Thorin's style. He was an important dwarf. If he'd been allowed, he probably would have gone on like this until he was out of breath without telling anyone there anything that was not known already. But he was rudely interrupted. Poor Bilbo couldn't bear it any longer. At may never return, he began to feel a shriek coming up inside, and very soon it burst out like the whistle of an engine coming out of a tunnel. All the dwarves sprang up, knocking over the table. Gandalf struck a blue light at the end of his magic staff, and in its firework glare, the poor little hobbit could be seen kneeling on the hearthrug, shaking like jelly that was melting. Then he fell flat on the floor and kept up calling out, struck by lightning, over and over again. That was all they could get out of him for a long time. So they took him and lay him out of the way on the drawing room sofa with a drink at his elbow and went back to their dark business. Excitable little fellow, said Gandalf as they sat down again. Gets funny, queer fits, but he is one of the best, as fierce as a dragon in a pinch. If you've ever seen a dragon in a pinch, you'll realize this is only poetical exaggeration applied to any hobbit. Even to old Took's great-granduncle Bullroarer, who was so huge for a hobbit he could ride a horse. He charged the ranks of the goblins on Mount Graham in the Battle of the Green Fields and knocked their king Golfrinbull's head clean off with a wooden club. It sailed 100 yards through the air and went down a rabbit hole, and in this way the battle was won and the game of golf invented at the same moment. In the meantime, however, Bullroarer's gentler descendant was reviving in the drawing room. After a while, and a drink, he crept nervously to the door of the parlor. This is what he heard. Glowin speaking. Humph, or some snort more or less like that. Will he do you think? It is all very well for Gandalf to talk about this hobbit being fierce, but one shriek like that in a moment of excitement would be enough to wake the dragon and all his relatives and kill the lot of us. I think he sounded more like fright than excitement. In fact, if it had not been for the sign on the door, I should have been sure we'd come to the wrong house. As soon as I clapped eyes on the little fellow bobbing and puffing on the mat, I had my doubts. He looks more like a grocer than a burglar. Then Mr. Baggins turned the handle and went in. The Took side had won. He suddenly felt he would go without bed and breakfast to be thought fierce. As for little fellow bobbing on the mat, it almost made him really fierce. Many a time afterwards, the Baggins part regretted what he did now, and he said to himself, Bilbo, you were a fool. You walked right in and put your foot in it.